This video is sponsored by Squarespace, more on that later. Hi friends, before we get into it, I want to thank my patrons. Your names are on screen. Thank you so much for being a patron. You guys are really the best. Love you. Thank you for your support. We do really fun stuff on Patreon every single month, including physical rewards. There is a sticker and a postcard sent out to you, or just a sticker. There's also an exclusive video every month, a podcast, early access to art, all sorts of things that interest you. If you want to support me a bit more, it's a great way to do it. Go check it out. Now for today's video. Listen, as a lesbian, I love to see the lesbians winning. I've been into Chappell Roan for a while. Pink Pony Club I've been listening to for a long time. I'm not gonna say that I knew Chappell Roan before she was big. I knew Pink Pony Club before that song was big. I've loved that song for, I think since the album came out, but I don't know when that was. I have no sense of time anymore. But of course, with all the rage that, Chappell Roan has, she's gotten huge. Of course, I've jumped on the bandwagon. I love Chappell Roan. I also love portraiture. And lately, I haven't done portraiture in a long time, but lately I've really had the itch. I've been really wanting to do more of it. So that's what we're doing. We're doing Chappell Roan. We're painting Chappell Roan's face. We're also doing something a little bit different. This is not what we're doing, okay? I know you guys want to see the end of this painting. I know. It's not that I'm not gonna do it. It's just that it's been a really long time. And it's just so hard for me to jump back into a project like that. I'm really gonna try to finish it. I'm really gonna try not to abandon it. I'm sorry. Anyways, of course I have painted portraits in acrylic before, and I've done acrylic on paper, but I've never done an acrylic portrait on paper. And it's not that acrylic suddenly performs entirely differently on paper, but it is kind of different. Different enough for me to feel like this is going to be an entirely new artistic experience for me. At least I'm kind of hoping that's the case. Where's my painter's tape? We're gonna paint Chappell Roan in acrylic on paper, and we're gonna call it an entirely new experience for me. I actually am really excited to see how it works. Acrylic on paper does kind of work like gouache, but I thought about doing this in gouache, but I was like, I don't want to deal with the reactivation. Portraiture with gouache is really fun, really great, but it reactivates so easily that blending can be difficult, or having like it not blend. It's a little more complicated than it's harder to make it like super stylized, which that's not necessarily what I'm going for, but it's hard to explain what my thought process is right now. But I'm hoping, I have an idea of what I think the experience will be like, and I'm hoping that I'm correct, but we'll see. Without any more chatting, let's get into painting. Before we continue, let's take a moment to talk about today's sponsor, Squarespace. You know what Squarespace is. I know you know what Squarespace is, but in case you don't, I'll fill you in if you insist. Squarespace is an all-in-one platform where creatives, freelancers, entrepreneurs, business owners, etc. can create a website that stands out online. Creating a website is not like the easiest thing in the world, but Squarespace makes it super accessible to everybody. They have a whole bunch of template options that you can choose from, and these templates have all sorts of use cases in mind, so no matter what you're looking to do online, there's something already made for you. You can customize it using Fluid Engine, which basically is drag and drop. Couldn't be easier. So you can add all sorts of widgets, buttons, photos, all sorts of different elements, animations, and then you can drag and drop it to specifically where you want it. And no matter what your business is doing, Squarespace has the tools to back you up. So if you want to have an online shop, great. You can sell products online, whether they're physical, digital, services, whatever. Squarespace allows you to seamlessly have a storefront. I love using Squarespace. I think it really allows me to creatively and artistically represent myself, which is obviously as a creative what I want to be doing. But it's also super professional and hits all of my needs. If you're also trying to step up your game professionally or you want to start a new business, whatever it may be, check out Squarespace. You can go to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/Lilstarnerd for 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring. Make sure you check them out. Let's continue. So I've used acrylic on paper a few times now. Most notably was the painting of 3 scrub jays that I did quite a while ago at this point. And then I painted another bird that was a Patreon original. What else? I know that there's more. Oh, I did the egret painting, like with the rainbow. I'm 99% sure that that was acrylic on paper. I feel like there's more than that, but that's all I can think of right now. Acrylic on paper is a really fun experience. I feel like all water-based paints, maybe even all paints in general, like including oil, but specifically water-based paints, they're on this spectrum of behavior, right? Like watercolors on one end, acrylics on the other, gouache in the middle. Acrylic gouache is like between gouache and acrylics, and then acrylic on paper kind of works somewhere between gouache and acrylics as well, but it's also not the same as acrylic gouache. I think in some ways it's actually a whole lot easier than a lot of other mediums, at least sometimes for certain things. It's super easy to layer. There's no limit to the layering. It doesn't reactivate, so you can go back and work on areas a lot. But on paper, I feel like you have more of an opportunity to take advantage of the drying time. I wouldn't say that it dries slower than it does on canvas, but I think it's easier to work with on paper. So you have the ability to blend if you want to. You have a lot more leniency with how watery you make your paint. Like on canvas, getting that ratio of paint and water, it's very specific because too watery and transparent means that it doesn't do anything on your canvas, right? But on paper, it will still work like paint, go where you want it to go, do what it needs to do, so you can stretch the paint farther, you can make it transparent, all that stuff. You can work with it in a much more versatile way. It's just super forgiving. It hits this weird, perfect middle ground of so many different painting elements that I'm not even sure that I'm fully aware of. It really scratches something for me. And another great point to make is that as much as I love gouache, I love gouache so much, I talk about it all the time, I say it's possibly my favorite medium, it's not something that I want to work on large projects with. The paint tubes are small, and while I do think gouache goes far, I don't think it covers as much ground as acrylic can. And also considering the tube sizes of acrylic and gouache and how much bigger acrylic is, it's definitely mentally easier to squeeze more acrylic paint out on my palette. And it definitely spreads more than acrylic gouache, which you definitely have to go through paint really quickly. So I think acrylic has a lot of things going for it, specifically when working on paper. And listen, I am not a fan of acrylics. Some people really love acrylics. Oil painters tend to hate them, especially people who start with oils. When it comes to acrylic on canvas, I would really rather not do it. I really don't care for acrylic on canvas. I don't like canvas. I'll use it, but I think that they can look really, really ugly. I think it's really easy to dislike acrylic on canvas. I do use acrylic on gesso boards, smooth or textured, and I think that can be really pretty and really nice. I do enjoy that. But my point is, the fact that I like acrylics on paper so much is definitely saying something, because I am not someone who will step up to defend their honor most times. I can make a lot of arguments against acrylics when used in the traditional way of painting on canvas. But anyways, every time that I have worked with acrylic on paper, it's been birds, I think, possibly every single time. There's something about acrylic on paper that feels kind of like I'm cheating, like it's a cheat code. It allows you to be very stylized and simple, but still precise and detailed. It feels like a way to get a project done faster, you know what I mean? So doing something that seems like it would be hard or annoyingly detailed, something like a bird with lots of color or feathers, doing that subject in acrylics on paper is a way to kind of speed up that process with the way it's so easy to stylize and block stuff in and get ground covered really quickly with paint. I don't know why, but it never occurred to me that the same thing might be true for portraits. When painting portraits with acrylics, I generally have a method that I follow pretty much every single time. I go in with a wide square brush and block shapes and colors in, and then I go in with a smaller round brush to start working in small areas and details. It works really well. I generally do it on smoother textured gesso board because I really try to avoid working on any sort of medium to small size canvas when possible because I hate the texture that it makes. It's really hard to do small work on a small canvas because that texture starts mattering a lot more and I hate it. But yeah, that process can absolutely be done on paper. But for some reason, the portrait process and the acrylic on paper process became two very different and like separate things in my mind. And I just never thought about like doing them together. I don't know. Like, even though I'm basically explaining the same concept in two different ways, like it is the same process, taking a complicated subject and simplifying it artistically. For some reason, it just never occurred to me until very recently. I think the main mental block is that portraits, for me, often feel like maybe too official or real for me to do on paper, as if paper like wasn't professional or finalized enough for a portrait to be presented on. Which just isn't true. I don't think there's anything wrong with doing your professional and official art like on paper. And even if that were true, the portraits that I have done are all of other people, like celebrities. So it's not like it's my original creative property to go into like a portfolio. And also, they just end up sitting around in my room with nothing to do and nowhere to go. So like, does it really matter how they're presented? No. So when I was planning what this video was going to be a while ago, I was like, I haven't done acrylic on paper in a while, and I would like to do that again. I've had the itch, just seems fun, why not? I think I had some like vague twist or point that would make the whole concept of video worthy, like not just paint with me on paper. Like, I don't know what it was. I don't remember what it was now. But there was something to it. But then I also started getting the itch to do portraits again, like paint them, draw them in my sketchbook, wherever. I just really got a craving to do portraits. So I was like, okay, what if I do a portrait with acrylic on paper? I'm a genius, never been done before. And I was honestly really excited about it, like very much looking forward to it, to getting to test it out. It was something that I don't know, I've been excited about art lately, but like this was just so palpable. I was like genuinely anticipating getting to film this video, which was fun. And of course, when it came to picking who I would be painting, it was no contest. I, like many others, have been devouring Chappell Roan's music lately. She's very pretty. She has such a cool and crazy artistic expression to her makeup, her outfits. I knew that she would have a wide variety of portraits for me to use as reference. And of course, I was right. She slays. Picking which photo was actually really hard. There were a lot of great ones, but I went with this one because it was the best, like, clear quality one. Like a lot of the others had a filter or were like fuzzy on purpose. This one was just like the easiest to see detail. It also had some cast shadows on the face, which is really helpful when painting, so you're not stuck with like wide expanses of flat skin, which can be really hard to paint well and make look normal. Yeah, that's a lot of buildup. There's a lot of background information. Let me tell you about the actual experience of using acrylics on paper to paint a portrait. And also, I am sick of saying acrylics on paper, so I'm just gonna say acrylics from now on. You can assume that I mean acrylics on paper. It was a wonderful, magical, amazing experience, and I will be doing it again. I went in with my usual technique of big, broad strokes to smaller details. I also obviously had the neon pink underpainting, which was so magical for this piece. Oh my god. Of course, I was going to do the neon pink. She had the neon pink blush. It just made sense. First of all, this piece just moved so quickly, and it really put itself together. It kind of aligned with the photo choice. Chappell is obviously wearing white face paint over her face, so having the warm pink underpainting worked really, really well. I could get my paint to a really nice viscosity to where it moved around really easily, and I didn't have to worry about it being super opaque because it actually made sense for the underpainting to peek through, you know, like her skin beneath the makeup. And the acrylics layered over themselves really, really easily and just so beautifully. They kind of melted together. They kind of worked like gouache in the way that they would dry a slightly different color, so color matching wasn't nearly as vital as it normally is with acrylics. So just working on the face was very easy. Every time I did realize that I got a color wrong, or it was too light or too dark or in the wrong spot, I could just really easily spot fix it. And like I said, it melted into itself really, really nicely. It kind of not blended, but yeah, like melted into itself. It layered really nicely, dried really nicely. Whereas, you know, when you're on canvas, having to fix those issues, like those same issues of like a tiny spot or area on the face, it would normally result in basically having to repaint the entire face because I wouldn't be able to color match well enough and blend it into the existing paint. Painting the face moved really quickly. I only needed one big go at it to feel satisfied with moving on to the next step. That might be more because her face was super one-toned rather than because of like how easy the acrylics were to work with, but either way, it did go really smoothly. Moving on to the fine detail was where I noticed my first snafu, but again, it might not be because of the paints. I tend to have this same exact issue with literally any paint ever, so I think it's more because of the quality of the brushes or my inability to use the brushes. But yeah, when it came down to really tiny detail, like tiny brush detail, I could not get the paint to move. I didn't want to make it too watery because usually when I'm doing those kinds of really tiny details, it's for really dark darks or really light lights, or maybe because I'm doing like a very, very thin line that I only want to do once because I won't be able to get it right a second time. You know, I'll make the line too thick. And in those cases, I want the paint to be as opaque as possible, so I only have to do it once. So I don't want to get it too watery, and I don't want to overload the brush with paint to the point that it's not a super tiny point anymore, but then that usually means that there's so little paint on the brush at all, and what is there literally won't move because there's no water with it, so much so to the point that it hardly even makes it onto the paper at all. But again, I really think that's more of a brush issue or my problem, like my fault. I don't think it's a problem unique to using acrylics, but it was a bit of an obstacle in the painting process. I did, however, hope that it would be easier on paper than it is on canvas to use those tiny brushes because there's no texture that the brush is fighting. I thought it would be easier, but unfortunately that wasn't the case. I quickly had to change back to a larger, still small, round brush and just hope that the details wouldn't be too clunky or ugly. You can see, especially in like the eyelashes, where that was a problem for me to be using a bigger brush. But for the less tiny details, for things like, you know, the eyes in general, once again, I had no issues. With that smaller brush, I did the features like eyes, bottom of the nose and nostril, and mouth. And for that, I use a different technique where I do blend on the spot instead of just doing basic mark making like I do with the wide brush. The blending also worked really, really well, which was great. Acrylics do stay wet for a few minutes. Like, I don't know how long. I really couldn't say. I think it also depends on like the weather. I do think the dry time on paper and canvas is very, very similar. So it's not like that's a unique feature to paper. But I do think it's a lot easier to blend them on paper. You know, I had no issues making subtle gradients or blurring things out. Again, I just think it melts into itself and is easier to move around on the paper. I think overall the paints just looked really beautiful. There's something about the finished look that looks so pretty to me. Like, it's a little bit glossy, there's some matte areas, there's some shiny areas, but it's so flat instead of having like any texture. I don't know, I think it looks really, really nice. I think it looks almost like printed on or something. I love it. However, you know, that's me talking very highly about it. Let's talk about some of the less good things. And it's actually still not about the acrylic painting experience. That was great. But the bad things are about my artistic decisions in this painting process. First of all, the hair, including eyebrows. The eyebrows. Actually, those are technically, I guess, a negative point about the paints themselves. But there's always a spot on every painting I ever do where no matter how much I work on it or how much I layer, nothing seems to change. Paint doesn't want to stick to it, I can't get paint to flow there. There's always like something going wrong with one area. And on this piece, it was her eyebrows. I tried so many times to get in there to make them a bit more detailed, look a bit nicer, get in those thin lines, but it seemed like everything I did either had no effect at all, like the paint just wouldn't go down, or it made them look uglier and muddier, or the lines weren't thin enough. So I just gave up on them. They're just there. But for the hair, I personally I hate doing hair at all, especially curly hair. I think curly hair is beautiful. I have curly hair. I think in theory it is much more interesting and honestly more aesthetically pleasing for hair in art. But painting curls kill me. Kill me. I've talked about this so often, but after I do the face on the portrait, I really just can't be bothered with anything else. Like, I've worked so hard on the face and now I have to work hard somewhere else. No, but I didn't want to completely phone it in on the hair like I usually do. So I was like, what if I do something more stylized, like on purpose? And so I thought I would try this. It's maybe more graphic, definitely a minimal, lazy method, where I scrubbed it all in with one color, then I layered curl patterns over it in a few other tones, like lighter tones, darker tones. And it was ugly. It was ugly. I tried to go back in and tone it down in some places, and then I added like highlights and detail-y type stuff in other places, just to try to make it look on this slightly same level as her face instead of being so different. But I don't know. I'm not sure I was able to save it. I don't think it distracts in the end, but I don't love it. And then there was the ascot. I told myself at the top of the painting that I would really, really try with the ascot, but I was at the end of the painting. Most of the paint on my palette was dried up, and I looked at the photo and I saw how many colors were on that thing, and I was like, no, not gonna do it. So I tried to block it in with just one color, but again, most of my paint was dry, so I even messed that up. I even messed it up having one color. Then I tried to fix it with shadows and stuff, but I was moving really fast because I was just ready to be done. So then that looked ugly, so I kind of tried to outline it, and then I was like, you know what? It's bad and it's ugly, and that's how it's gonna stay, and that is okay. We're done. Oh, we're done. I have not actually used my easel in this studio at all yet, so this was a fun experience. It actually worked really well. Really great lighting. A little bit hard to move around because I've tucked myself in the corner, but it all worked. And we're done with the painting. I'm very happy with it. The ascot, I did phone it in and it does look horrible. This was so fun. I had such a good time. I don't know. I'm just so happy with the way it turned out, and this was such a fun process. Oh, no. No spoilers. I had such a good time. This was such a fun process. I think it definitely was a different experience to anything that I've done before, like a mishmash of other previous experiences. Some experimenting. Some turned out okay, some didn't. I gotta clean up, and then we'll peel some tape, we'll do the reveal, we'll do the outro. Let's go. Oh my god. It kind of seriously slays. Chapel Roan, my queen. I am really so happy with this. I'm also shaking. I am truly so in love with how this turned out. I don't know. The hair, but the face, which is the focal point, right? I think turned out so freaking good. The colors, I'm just really, really pleased with it. And I'm really pleased with the way, I mean, I knew I liked the way that acrylics looked on paper, but as for a portrait, I love the way it looks for a portrait. This might be my new favorite way of doing portraits. I think it gives kind of the same vibe as like it on gesso board, but it performs differently. It's kind of more fun to work with. Just overall, really happy, really satisfied. Great experiment. I invented using acrylic on paper, actually. No one's ever done it before. Actually, originally, when I first tried it, I got the idea from Prickly Alpaca because she said that it kind of performs like gouache. When you kind of water it down a little bit and you work with it in layers. It's kind of between gouache and acrylic, but my point is she's the one who gave me the idea to even try it because I never ever would have done that before. Just, you set up these art rules for yourself, these rules of like, well, this is for this and this is for that. I never would have thought to put acrylic on paper, but I'm so glad she talked about it because then I got to try it, really enjoyed it, and now I'm here and I made this painting that I really like. That's it. I haven't written the voiceover. I have no idea what I talked about in the voiceover. It might have just been talking about the painting because I feel like I have a lot to say about this, but I don't know. Either way, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was a fun time. Thank you for joining me while we painted this. If you haven't tried acrylics on paper and you're someone who likes painting, like in general, try this because it's a really fun mishmash of a lot of different other ways of painting. And I honestly think this is the easiest way to paint. Like, from my few attempts, I think this is the easiest, which is kind of a crazy thing to say. I mean, it depends on your style and what you paint, but like, it's great for blending, but there's no major reactivation, but it doesn't dry super fast, but it doesn't dry super slow. Like, it's this weird combination of like everything that I kind of want from everything that I paint with. I love it. I really, really love it. And I would recommend it. But that's it. That's all I have to say. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, like, comment, subscribe. You know the drill. Thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring. Make sure you check them out. And I will see you next time. Bye.